could get this even with the wind. But today, I thought I'd kind of walk you through one of my favorite lenses. The 24 to 70. So we're just gonna walk around a little bit for the park and I'll kind of walk you through why I think this is by far one of the best lenses anyone who's getting into photography should get. And even after owning this particular model of this lens, I've had it for I want to say about 4 years, and it's still one of my favorite lenses that's constantly on my camera. So let's take a walk about the park and kind of showcase you why I think everyone should buy a lens like this. All right. So I decided to come outside today to kind of give you some, I guess, consistent reasons why I think one of my favorite lenses is actually the best lens to get started on photography. This right here is the Nikon 24 to 70 2.8. And let me kind of explain why I think this lens right here, there's some boats, I think is the best lens for anyone to get started with photography. One, it's actually a very versatile lens where it has the range of 24, which is fairly wide, and then to 70, which is also consistently a good distance for a lot of different things. So to kind of give you an idea, the human eye naturally sees in a focal range about 50 millimeters to 70 millimeters. That's why when you see a lot of portraits that are done with an 85 or a 50, it seems very more appealing to the natural eye. So it's kind of one of the reasons I highly suggest this lens is that the focal range is very versatile. I've used this as my go-to travel lens, where 95% of my shots are usually shot with this guy right here. So I highly suggest this as your first lens. So let's take some shots and kind of see where things go with it. So I'd say for the second main reason I would suggest anyone to get a 24 to 70 is that when you're working with ultra wide lenses, like let's say something in the range of 14 to 24, which is another common lens, it's not going to be giving you a lot of distortion, right? And then now if you're going to be working with, let's say, a telephoto lens, like a 70 to 24 millimeter range, that gets a little harder to work with because the focusing distance for a lot of these photos are going to be a bit of a challenge. So you'll have to either get really far away or really close to your subject to actually get really good focusing on that. So that's kind of why I suggest starting off with this lens, because it's a very user-friendly lens to get started with. And to be quite honest, just on my own, I could actually get quite a bit of the river just here, just with the 24. So that's one of the nice things about this, is that the zoom allows you to get a lot of detailed shots. So as I walk around in the park, I'll kind of showcase some of the photos I'm capturing just with the zoom on in this range. Got some more boats going in. Anyway, another really nice thing I like about this lens is that I do a lot of travel and landscape photography, in that what I like is that I need a lens that's going to be very, very sharp when I do a lot of very in-depth photos. So for example, if I want a lot of things in focus, when I stop it down to a sharper f-stop, which allows me to get more in focus, it's very, very sharp. And so it doesn't matter if I'm, you know, zoomed into 24 all the way to the 70 range, the lens is very sharp. And so that's kind of one of the reasons I highly suggest this lens as well for anyone wanting to get into landscape or travel photography, is that the aperture is very sharp from when you stop it down very, very low. But what's also really nice is that when I've actually used it for cityscapes or when I don't have a lot of light to work with, this lens still works really, really well in low light. Hence the 2.8 aperture, is that this lens just has a lot to work with from the lower end of the aperture to the higher end of the aperture. So it's a very, very versatile and very well respectable lens to use. So I highly suggest anyone who wants to get into landscape or travel photography, this might be your go-to lens. So let's get this shot. Here. Another really interesting thing about a 24 to 70 is that most camera manufacturers have them. So in most cases, even if you don't have a, let's say, a full frame, you have a crop sensor or even a micro four thirds camera. In most cases, a lot of manufacturers have their own 24 to 70 available. But what I really like about this focal length, since it's so popular, is that I actually have a Sigma. So this isn't actually this isn't a Nikon lens specifically. It's actually a third-party lens, which in many cases actually makes it more affordable. In this, I think I got this guy in particularly on Amazon for about $1,050. It's very affordable as compared to the primary mirrorless camera version of this. It's ringing about $2,100 or so right now. So overall, if you could get a good deal, you might want to try out, let's say, a more affordable option like the Sigma or a Tamron, for example. So there's a lot of good options out there for people who are interested in getting into this. I don't have a lot of time because we're starting to lose the sun and the sun's about to set completely, but I was about to take a photo of some water bugs that were skimmaging here through the water, and unfortunately I dipped the lens in the water, which, you know, besides the fact that I just have to clean it on top, one of the nice things about these 24 to 70s lenses is that most cases they're weather sealed, which means, you know, if you get some water, some snow, some sand, a little bit of rock and dust on them, you don't have to worry so much because they're weather sealed, they're very robust in that sense. And one of the other really nice things about these lenses is that, for example, because they're so robust, I've unfortunately dropped this lens a couple times. So for example, if you are climbing a mountain, hiking up a rugged road, or, you know, maybe just set your backpack down too hard, what I like about these lenses is that they could take a beating. And for me, I need that because I'm usually going off to, well, not so electronic friendly locations to get a lot of the great shots I get. And so if anyone really wants a very reliable, robust lens that's going to take a beating from the elements and, well, your rough handling, I highly suggest getting one of these. So before all these bugs start eating me, let me just get a really great shot of the sunset. Alright, well, I'd say we have about 2 minutes before the sun's completely down, so let's head back to my office and finish off this video, and I'll tell you the final reasons why I think everyone should get a 24 to 70. Alright, now that we're back in my office, I kind of should have timed that a little bit better and gotten sooner to the park, but it happens. Anyway, let's finish up this, I guess you could say, recommendation. So, as I said, 24 to 70 is one of the great focal lengths for anyone to essentially have in their kit. Another really great reason that I suggest this particular lens to a lot of beginners is mostly it has a lot of, it's easy to use, but it has its advantage in terms of learnability. And what I mean by learnability is that because there's not a lot of issues that this lens could cause you, like lack of focus, autofocusing, or let's say lens distortion, focal range differentiation. The beauty about this lens is that it's very simple and very easy to use, and because it's so easy to use, I highly recommend anyone to try it out. And besides the reach, what I liked having is that because it's just so versatile and has a lot of pros for this particular lens, it doesn't matter if you're doing landscapes, if you're doing some portraits, or if you're just doing some travel or even street photography. This particular lens will be a very well-rounded character, I suppose, for your very well-rounded tool for you to use. That being said, I'm not going to say that there's no drawbacks to this lens, right? So one of the main drawbacks to this particular lens is if you are going to be doing portraits or street photography, you may want something that has, let's say for example, that might be even sharper than this, right, for handheld purposes. So let's say if you're going to be doing a portrait, you may want something with more depth of field, so a wider aperture. So that's where a prime lens, a portrait lens like a 50 millimeter, or let's say a 58 ideally millimeter, will yield better results than, let's say, this right here. Another really great, another con of this lens is that in some cases it can be very pricey, and because it's kind of pricey compared to other sort of lenses, some people are kind of turned away from getting this. So another really great example for a well-rounded lens that some people get is, let's say, a 24-70, but instead of a 2.8 they get an f4. So what that means is that the iris will be a little smaller than, let's say, this guy's lens. And I guess the last con, really, if you could call it that, is kind of an opinionated one, is that certain people just don't like this focal range. So for example, if they want to do landscape, some people prefer wider than a 24. Or if they're going to be doing portraits, they kind of want something with a farther reach, like a 85 millimeter, or some people really like a 105 millimeter for portraits. And then some people actually prefer, let's say, a 70 to 200 for portraits themselves. So it kind of varies based on opinion, but unfortunately, because it is the 24 to 70 range, there's no higher zoom, so to speak, for this lens. So overall, these are kind of the main reasons why I recommend someone to have this lens in their kit, or actually if they're going to be buying their first professional level lens for a full frame camera, this is kind of why I suggest this particular lens. So so for the last bit, we're just going to kind of go over some of my favorite photos that I've taken with this lens, and hopefully these photos kind of entice you to look into getting a lens like this.